Hello, everybody, and welcome to Monaghan Presbyterian Church. We are delighted you are joining us as we continue our journey through the book of Acts.
This is a long journey.
But like you said, halfway was last week, so...
Well, depending on how much I break up the chapters.
Well, we got through 14. There's a total of 28, so I'm going to say that...
We're halfway.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm trying to, try to take on bigger chunks at a time. But like this week, for example, we're doing all of chapter 15. And I easily could have split this into like 3 or 4 different weeks. Easily.
Yeah.
But that's why we have these questions. It helps us focus on each different part of it.
Right.
So here we are, and we hope everybody's doing well.
Absolutely.
Wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We're glad you're listening.
Mm-hmm.
So we are continuing our study of Acts through more of an adult Sunday school format. Right?
Correct.
We kind of transitioned a little bit since in-person worship is available to stream and all that stuff.
Right.
But if you are missing that, if that's how you were doing this from home and want us to we sometimes remember to record it. But we can always send you that if you want that, but you need to let us know. Because nobody has, therefore we haven't done it.
Right.
So if you're missing, if you want that worship component, let us know. But in the meantime, we are in Acts 15, and this chapter seems like summing up a lot of what we've already looked at and also setting us up for what's next. Like it's a summary and preparation chapter.
Yeah.
Because we begin with this conversation that we've had the last few weeks about, how do the Gentiles fit into this whole followers of Christ thing. And we've looked at it, and we've had different glimpses of it, and we saw first that like Peter had that vision, that trance of the animals and the sheet, and that prepared him to go to Cornelius's house. Is that right?
I think so.
I think it's Cornelius. Cornelius's house, and baptize Gentiles and see them receive the gifts of the Spirit. And then kind of at the same time, we had Paul and Barnabas, and they started to interact with more Gentiles. And that was all happening, and yet those in Jerusalem weren't really happy about it. Like, it seems like they kept getting reports about it.
Yeah.
And this all seemed to have been building that tension that we've seen between the Jews and the Gentiles and the followers of Christ who are trying to talk to both of them. This is all built up to this chapter. Mm-hmm. It really does. It comes to its climax. And it's weird. Like they formed a committee, and it's kind of what it feels like. They formed a committee. It was very Presbyterian-esque of them.
We're Presbyterians are delighted by that fact.
So yeah, our first question is that we're looking at, that building tension that has been going on. And let's really talk about that, because we've kind of alluded to it. Maybe haven't named it as firmly as we could, because talking about tension in religious bodies always goes well.
Well, I think, especially last week, we identified that there is, this idea of segmentation among people. There will always be tension where you have two groups that, may not agree on certain aspects. But the thing I took away from at least the beginning of this, to an extent is, well, that other group can become part of this group, but there's a cost to it. So it's not just saying, well, we aren't two groups, we're one group with differing opinions. It's, we're two groups, but you can become part of my group, the
If you
good group.
fully assimilate in the ways we tell you to.
Correct. And that, although I did find it interesting that Peter, of course, kind of sums up how I think, and this is kind of jump into question number 2, how we should be looking at it. And, I will refer to the actual text in verses 8 and 9. I need to get on my spectacles. Peter says, "And God, who knows the human heart, testified to them by giving them the Holy Spirit, just as he did to us. And in cleansing their hearts by faith, he has made no distinction between them and us." Now, I mean, sitting here, like kind of armchair quarterbacking, several thousand years in the future, that kind of seems pretty straightforward.
It does. And, I think what grieves me the most in this entire conversation that we've had over the last few weeks about this is that there wasn't rejoicing. When Pentecost hit, like that, like it's a hurricane or something, but when the first Pentecost happened, because we've seen in Acts that it's happened, there have been multiple receiving of the Holy Spirits, but that first one, and they preached, and all these people gathered, and thousands were added to their numbers. They celebrated that. They were excited about it. And now that it's gotten a little bit not just the people who look and think like me, all of a sudden it has been a tension. It's become a crisis almost that needs to be solved by the elders of the church.
Right.
Instead of a joyful celebration that more people know the redemptive love of God. So I grieve it as I grieve every single divisive thing that happens in church, because it takes away that joy. We get focused on that. Well, this isn't going the way I want it to, or this isn't fitting into my box or my ideas, and I'm out of here. Or however it looks for different people. So we're seeing that in this chapter. Paul and Barnabas come back and they get called before the church council, it seems like, and they didn't call themselves a council. I'm calling them a council because it's what it feels like to me. And they have to account for themselves. How could you do this? It's wrong. Going back to Moses, you have to follow the path of Moses.
Well, it's not, I don't think they were saying that it was wrong of them to do. They're just saying that now you need to go back and exact a price.
That's a fair way to look at that.
That's really what I'm seeing is, Peter, they have the Holy Spirit, but they have to conform to what we do.
And that comes out to look, maybe they don't need to be circumcised, but they need to follow these things. And they come up with those guidelines that...
Eventually. But it starts out as everybody needs to be circumcised. And,
right.
That's where the council, like, Peter's like, no, they don't. Because God's just, he's on a float in a parade and he's just chucking candy to everybody. He's not, he's not saying you have to be wearing a blue hat or anything. He's just,
everybody gets it.
Everybody gets it. And, who are we to put these restrictions on it?
And that's exactly what we do over and over again. You have to do this, and you have to be this way, and you can't do that sin. That sin's really wrong, and you can't think that, and you have no place here, or whatever hoops and bars we created throughout the church's history.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus paid the price so that we could all know God's redemptive love.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we make it harder for others to have what we've been given? Why do we do that? Why do we think that somehow we're worthy, but somebody else has to earn it? Because it feels like what they're almost saying. You know, we deserved this. They have to earn it.
One way I think about it is, you know, for those who are, you know, who have already followed the path of Moses, the Jews who are now followers of Christ, it's not that they deserved it, they were born into it. You know, so it's like a privilege, you know.
It's a heritage.
Right.
It's an inheritance.
I'm already here. I was already in the synagogue. I was already on the streets of Jerusalem when all these elders started like speaking in tongues, and you know, I was there because I've already been here, because this is where I grew up.
Man, I'm just going to say it again because it fits again. But the parable of the workers in the vineyard has come back again.
Mm-hmm. But that's what it feels like. And I mean, even in today's world, you know, I mean, privilege is a very real thing.
It is.
And when people seem to be getting something that I feel I should get, or I have as a result of, you know, being the, you know, trifecta, winfecta, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male, you know, I've got a lot of doors that are just open to me personally, and I can acknowledge that I am in a position not of my own doing, or I can sort of say, well, this is where I am and I deserve to be here. And if you're not here, oh well, that's not my problem. When the only reason I'm here is not because I deserve to be here, I just happen to.
That's how you were born. That's
Right.
where you were born.
Yep. How I was born, where I was born.
Yeah, we tend to lose sight of that even just simply where we were born can have a huge impact on the opportunities available to us. Even just thinking about voting, which everybody should do, by the way. You should vote. If you're in Carroll Township, your polling place is the church. And, you know, I get to just show up to vote. I have no line, usually. I don't vote in Carroll Township. Carroll Township usually has a line. I'm in Upper Allen, and I walk in, I vote, I walk out. It's less than 5 minutes. But that is a privilege because I've seen friends in lines hours and hours long to vote early. And even just that simple act that is literally a right every citizen of this country has, there are definite advantages that some have in order that they have to exercise that privilege,
Right.
that right.
Mhm.
It's not a privilege, it's a right that others don't have.
Right.
And I think, well, I don't have to experience that, so what do I care?
Right. You know, oh, well, there's a new voter ID law. Well, I've had a driver's license for almost 30 years. What's the big deal? Well, I know people who live in cities that don't have a driver's license.
They don't need
'Cause
them.
They've never driven in their entire life. You know, they're approaching 50 and they've never driven. So why would they have that form of ID? You know, depending on your socioeconomic status, you can't take off to go, whether it's 5 minutes or 3 hours standing in a line. You can't take that time off. You know, a lot of larger companies are being heralded as, you know, doing this great thing by, like, I don't know if it's Amazon or some of them are just like, yeah, everyone gets time off to go vote. And that's just a thing that's happening, even if the company shuts down for several hours, like, or it's a paid holiday or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not to say that they shouldn't be acknowledged, but the fact that,
They need to do that in the first place.
well, the fact that it seems like a magnanimous thing, oh, look, aren't they being so wonderful by allowing this to happen? It's like, why doesn't it happen anyway? Because by making people choose between keeping a job and exercising a right, like, that doesn't seem like a choice somebody should have to make.
Yeah. No, we've made voting inaccessible. And we're kind of on a tangent here, but at the same time, we're not. If you make the connection to whether or not church is accessible, is learning about Jesus accessible? And I think there have been times where we, and by we, I mean like just universal, we here have made it inaccessible.
Mm-hmm.
Even just simply the word accessible. There are churches that you are not accessible if you have trouble with stairs.
Mm-hmm.
That simple point right there is, it has become inaccessible. Granted, we're living in a pandemic right now, and church is kind of inaccessible, but we're trying to make it accessible in many different formats.
Mm-hmm.
You're listening to this now as in one of those ways we've tried to make it accessible. But there are little things we do all the time that make church inaccessible.
Mm-hmm.
Even just how we talk about God, how we talk about Jesus. I think in a lot of ways, this situation that they're facing in chapter 15, we're not back in 5, in 15, is about accessibility.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't want to make it freely accessible. It's not just you have to say, I believe in Jesus. You have to then do these things as well. Or you have to follow this. And none of what they say is what Jesus said of love God and love one another. That's not the list of 3 things that they come up with.
No.
Now we're moving down into further in the questions here, but they come up with, don't eat animals that have been sacrificed. Right? And what's the word? Fornication?
Yes.
That's the word. I couldn't find it for a second. The whole fornication part of that, and we're gonna break these down for you, so don't think we're just flying past them. And then also the strangulation of animals were the 3 things that they pull out as, okay, you can go back to them bringing these other people with you as well so that we make sure you're saying what you're supposed to be. Not that that's why they're saying it, but that's kind of what I'm taking from it.
Yeah.
Chaperones.
Entirely possible.
Ambassadors, maybe. Either way. You know, okay, they don't need to be circumcised necessarily, but they need to follow these rules.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not the greatest commandment of loving God and loving one another.
Yeah.
But if we break them down, maybe they could be. Let's try it. Let's see if it passes that love God, love one another.
All right.
You're going to come on this journey with me?
Sure.
Okay. So the first one was you have scripture open. You want to?
Oh my.
I know. Glasses back on and everything.
Mm-hmm. Do.
19-ish.
Oh yeah, there you go. To abstain only from things polluted by idols, and from fornication, and from whatever has been strangled, and from blood.
Okay, so whatever has been what titles? I've lost it. I heard it, but I lost it. What was that word? Tainted?
Oh,
Is that what the word was? Tainted?
polluted by idols.
So what has ever been polluted by idols? Well, if we go back to the commandments, we know that you're not supposed to have idols.
Mm-hmm.
And if we think about the ancient Greek culture, there was a lot of sacrificing to the Greek gods that we talked about last week, where Zeus and Hermes were mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so my guess is that this was a attempt to say that you can't keep those idols.
Right. Because in those households, they would have had
Shrines.
to,
There would have been temples.
yeah.
To
So it would have
different
been,
gods,
you need to
little
remove
g.
all of this. Yeah.
Yeah, this can't be. Which, thinking about the culture, that seems kind of fair.
Well, it's a big deal in that, you're. I mean, it's kind of like, okay, this is what you claim to profess. Now here's your first all-in.
Yeah, this is your list of all-ins.
Yeah.
And it's going to look different than it has for others because they came from a different place.
Right.
Here they kind of have to break down those cultural norms. So the first one would be breaking that idol aspect, which I guess is how they've translated thinking about the little g gods,
Right.
of which there were dozens and dozens. So, okay, that one kind of holds up.
Yeah. That makes sense.
We're going to keep that one because honoring God would mean you shouldn't be worshiping other gods and idols. That holds up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what about this fornication one? You did some research on this one.
Leviticus chapter 18.
See, there's your biblical reference for it. And what is Leviticus chapter 18 about, Lincoln?
Well, I mean, really, it's about, it starts out, don't do what you did in, what they did in Egypt. Don't do what they do in Canaan. So it's like, don't do stuff where you came from. Don't do stuff where you're going. But then it goes into this long list of the nakedness of kin. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, which is the nakedness of your mother.
Which got Ham all messed up. And Noah.
Yeah, but, then, it's like, uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. It is the nakedness of your father. So your father's nakedness is your mother. Your father's wife's nakedness is your father. Like, it's very peculiar.
It's peculiar.
And it goes through a whole litany of persons, aunts, uncles.
Okay, nakedness bad.
And that's really where it ends, is, that it's a, to do any of this is depravity,
Okay.
you know.
So, this list that they have to go back to with two, I messed those all up, but is against nakedness,
And taking of,
others' identity, innocence, kind of
yeah,
thing, maybe.
well, and like, it almost goes into those, do not covet thy neighbor's
Oh,
wife
look at you bringing in
thing,
a commandment. Now, help us all remember.
Uh-oh.
Were the ancient Greeks known for their wardrobes?
I don't think so.
No. No, there were, togas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, think of the, the original Olympians, that was all nakedness.
Mm-hmm.
And they saw that as a sign of strength and vitality.
You're stripping away anything else. It's
No
literally
performance
just
enhancing objects.
correct.
Now, I'm gonna throw a curveball. We didn't talk about this one ahead of time.
Oh, this should be fun.
Right? So, if we go back to the Garden of Eden,
Wow.
right? Nakedness was a good thing until they ate of the fruit, and then they hid themselves and covered themselves.
Well, I would challenge that to say that nakedness wasn't even a thing.
It wasn't a thing. Like, it was just, you're pure and the way you are.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of almost felt like the way the Greeks handled it, but then there's a lot of free love going on, I think. Is that a good way to put that?
Well, maybe. Yeah.
Is that a good way?
Yeah.
I'm not meaning to be offensive about that. It's just that there was a lot of promiscuity. Is that a good way to put that? And so maybe, talking about the fornication is a way to pull them out of that mindset.
Yeah.
Maybe. Plus, there's that whole coveting thing and lustfulness and all of that, because it, So it's kind of where we're thinking they were headed with that one, is
Yeah, I
that
think so.
aspect of the culture.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, that fits with some commandments.
Mm-hmm.
And loving one another, that's respect. If we have any, nudists listening right now, this might really not be a great conversation. I'm not even sure what to do for that, but I just thought I'd name it just to make this as awkward as possible for everybody.
Okay. Mission accomplished.
This will not be part of Sunday's sermon. We're doing that here so you guys don't have to do that there. And then it goes into this strangulation thing.
And of blood, yeah.
And blood. And we looked this one up, and, strangulation would be the idea of taking one's life, and blood was life.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I guess it's like the whole not murdering and, again, honoring and...
Well,
the fornication, that's honoring your mother and father, too, based on what you read in Leviticus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to go back to that. But so this really seems to be about not killing and honoring life. Maybe you're thinking, you're pondering.
Yeah.
He's got that look.
I think that it's, yeah, I think it's just a way to, again, kind of put a curve on their existing culture.
Yeah. How do we feel about that?
I still think it is a price for admittance, but it's not as steep a price, potentially.
Maybe. Because last week we started talking even about, Christianity's history in this country. And I'm thinking of the indigenous people who were here.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't dress the way the Europeans did. Not even close. And they had different ideas of God.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the strangulation one fits in here at all because they honored nature in a way that we never seem quite on par with.
No.
So I don't think that one would be, but just, and I think of how absolutely detrimental those other two ideas were to the people who were here already.
Mm-hmm.
And that was way too high of price to ask them to pay.
It was detrimental because they were not,
Asking to pay it.
well, they were not asked to pay. They were,
Forced to pay?
or be killed.
Yeah. Or pushed away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I struggle with this admittance fees. And membership fees and
I mean, that's what it feels like. And, when you asked your question, about, what is that line for us today? And, the way I thought about it was, your line is, what price are you willing to make someone else pay?
yeah.
If there is a homeless person who wants to come worship here but can't give, is that a problem?
Nope. Not for me.
Not, but but
Some places, yes.
what is that line? And everybody's line is different.
Mm-hmm.
And is that price too high? Again, going back to Peter's words of Jew or Gentile, God has cleansed us through faith so that there is no difference. You are not Jew, you are not Gentile, you are a child of God.
Yeah.
That's the only label that matters, and that label applies to everybody.
Yeah, Peter gets it. I'm not entirely sure everybody else did.
No, I don't think they did because, really, I think the biggest change, if everybody had gotten it in this sense, at least for like the Greeks, would have been, yeah, you really need to lose the, gods of and goddesses of all the things.
Which, if you're going to be all in,
Right. Isn't really, but
it's not
I don't think that would necessarily have to be a written requirement. I think that would organically come as, if they are indeed all in, they would understand, oh, this stuff doesn't make sense anymore.
Okay, I just had a thought.
Buckle up.
Yeah, you might want to. So thinking about this in that perspective of going back, thinking about these rules based on the circumcision part, the fact that if there was a lot of nakedness, which we've seen that there probably was, the lack of circumcision would be very obvious. Which would then could then become a stumbling block for others who really held the law of Moses still. So this could be a first generational issue more than
Right.
beyond issue.
Well, and I mean, you even see that, in the last 100 years, what has changed generation by generation, what generations that were, the grown-ups in the 60s who absolutely could not abide by this, that, or the other thing by the 70s or 80s was not a big deal.
Yeah.
What was a big deal in the 80s, not a big deal now.
Some places
More-
still, yes.
Well, but more and more. Like, you
Yeah.
can see a definite shift where, like, okay, looking at, say, the United States as a whole on, like, sort of big picture average, certain societal issues are really a big deal for older generations and really aren't a big deal for younger generations. Like, you can just see that divide that,
Their
younger
experiences
generations
have been
don't-
different.
they don't see things the same way.
Right.
And therefore, over generations, those things just kind of
Yeah.
fall by the wayside,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Okay.
So,
I think we've delved into those requirements enough for now. There was one more question about
James
Paul.
and his scripture.
Well, we kind of already talked about that.
Oh, true.
That's where those came from, right?
That's where what the final rules
Yeah.
were. Yeah.
Yeah. So the last question though was about Paul and Barnabas splitting ways,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
and I might deal with that one on Sunday. So
Yeah.
you might get to hear more of that one because that will lead into next week as well. Which will be, we're just doing a few verses next week. It was 2 different. And next week is All Saints Sunday.
Yes, it is.
So if you didn't get your email, go check your email. The one that was sent out on Wednesday night. For it has information about All Saints Sunday. And we're asking you to, send in a picture of someone you might have lost this year or an index card of a grief you're carrying. And that seems especially important this year because I think a lot of people are carrying a lot of very different griefs right now. And so next Sunday will be an opportunity to name some of those and seek God's peace and healing and celebrating the saints at the same time. So check Wednesday's email because I looked at the opening rate on some of these emails and people aren't reading the informational email as much as they're opening the Sunday email. So if you're not reading the informational email, there's a lot of stuff in that email. There's a lot of information. Stuff about pen pals
Yeah.
and phone buddies and, even a Secret Santa kind of idea. So go back and read the email from Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm not going to have a phone buddy because I hate the phone.
You're in a different generation. With text buddy, you could have a text buddy.
There you go.
Send funny memes to.
Yeah, my kids do that. I get like 6 stickers from Eli every day he's doing his schoolwork on the iPad.
That's fun. Elle and I send each other Bitmojis.
Yeah, Eli wants to know how to do those.
It's an app.
I know. I know all about it.
I love my Bitmoji. I'm kind of not answering the last question because I think I'm going to do that one on Sunday. So,
Yeah.
but ponder it at home. And I think we've actually gone a really long time already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've we've been talking for a long time.
Oh, that's fine.
So if you're still listening, great. We love having you here all the way to the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely if you're not reading the midweek email, there's a lot of information usually in that email. So please read it. And thanks for joining us in this conversation today.
Yep. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.